Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the International Space Coordination Center, watching the stars through the massive viewport. She had been Earth's primary liaison with extraterrestrial civilizations for 5 years now, ever since humanity had stumbled into the greater galactic community. In that time, she had learned one undeniable truth: the galaxy was not a kind place. Her communicator buzzed with an urgent priority signal. Elena's heart sank. Priority signals never brought good news. She activated the holographic display, and the image of Ambassador Krell materialized before her. Krell was a Vorton, a species known for their bureaucratic efficiency and complete lack of empathy. His scaled face showed no emotion as he delivered his message. Dr. Vasquez, the Galactic Federation Council has reached a decision regarding your planet's recent conduct, Krell began, his voice carrying the mechanical precision of a being who had delivered bad news countless times before. 3 weeks ago, Earth representatives challenged the Federation's labor allocation policies at the General Assembly. You called our system exploitative and demanded reforms. Elena remembered that day well. She had watched the session from Earth, proud as humanity's delegates stood up for the rights of dozens of species being treated as little more than slaves. The Federation had built its prosperity on the backs of weaker civilizations, and someone needed to say it out loud. The Council has decided to teach Earth a valuable lesson about the consequences of interference, Krell continued. The Zenari refugee crisis requires immediate resolution. 15 million Zenari fled their homeworld after the Crothian invasion. The Federation has determined that Earth will accept 6 million of these refugees. The first transport ships will arrive in 48 hours. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. 6 million? Ambassador Krell, we have never hosted alien refugees before. We need time to prepare, to understand their needs, to build facilities. The decision is final. The Zenari are considered a low-value species by Federation standards. They possess no military capability, no rare resources, and no advanced technology. Frankly, they are a burden no member world wishes to bear. Earth has been selected due to your recent advocacy for the less fortunate. Consider this an opportunity to practice what you preach. And if we refuse? Krell's expression might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell with his species. The ships are already in transit. If you fire upon them, it will be considered an act of war. If you turn them away, 6 million beings will die in the void, and their blood will stain Earth's reputation forever. Either outcome serves our purposes. Good day, Dr. Vasquez. The transmission ended, leaving Elena staring at empty space where Krell's image had been. Her hands were shaking. This was not just a refugee crisis. This was a trap, a punishment designed to break humanity's spirit and prove that compassion was a luxury only the powerful could afford. She picked up her phone and made the call that would change everything. Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth knew what was coming. Within 12 hours, the United Nations had convened an emergency session. Within 24 hours, the world was holding its breath. Secretary General James Okafor addressed the assembly with the weight of history on his shoulders. He was a man from Ghana who had spent his life fighting for human rights, and now he faced a test that would define humanity's place in the cosmos. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been given an impossible choice, Okafor said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. In 24 hours, 6 million refugees from a species we have never met will arrive at our doorstep. They are being sent to us not because we are the best equipped to help them, but because we dared to speak against injustice. The Federation expects us to fail. They expect us to turn these people away and prove that our words about compassion and justice were empty rhetoric. The Russian delegate stood abruptly. This is an act of aggression. We should refuse. Let the Federation deal with their own problems. And let 6 million innocent people die? The delegate from Kenya challenged. Is that who we are? We have our own problems, the Chinese delegate added. Our own people struggle with poverty, hunger, disease. How can we take care of aliens when we cannot even take care of ourselves? Okafor let the debate rage for an hour before he raised his hand for silence. I understand every argument in this room. I understand the anger, the fear, the sense that we are being treated unfairly. Because we are. The Federation is using these refugees as weapons against us. They are betting that we will fail, that our compassion has limits, that when tested, we will reveal ourselves to be just as cruel as they are. He paused and looked around the room at the faces of Earth's most powerful leaders. But what if we prove them wrong? What if we show the galaxy that humanity is different? Not because we are stronger or richer or more advanced, but because we choose to be different. We choose compassion even when it costs us. We choose to help even when it is hard. We choose to be better. The vote was not unanimous. 17 nations refused to participate. But enough nations said yes. Enough people decided that humanity would at least try. By the time the sun rose over New York, the Global Zenari Integration Initiative had been created. It was underfunded, understaffed, and facing a deadline that seemed designed to ensure failure. But it existed, and that was something. Captain Sarah Chin flew her reconnaissance jet through Earth's upper atmosphere as the first Zenari ships appeared on the horizon. She had been a pilot for 15 years, had flown in 3 military conflicts, but nothing had prepared her for this sight. The ships were massive, dark gray cylinders that stretched for miles. They were not passenger vessels. They were cargo haulers, the kind used for transporting raw materials across the galaxy. The Federation had loaded 6 million living beings into cargo ships. "Command, this is Eagle 1, Sarah reported into her radio. "I have visual on the lead transport. They are beginning atmospheric entry over the Pacific." "Copy that, Eagle 1. Guide them to landing zone Alpha in Australia. We have reception facilities standing by." Sarah banked her jet and took position ahead of the lead ship. Below, she could see the massive preparation efforts. In 48 hours, an army of volunteers had transformed empty desert land into a temporary city. Thousands of prefabricated shelters stretched across the landscape. Water purification systems, medical stations, and food distribution centers had been airlifted from every continent. It would not be enough. Everyone knew it would not be enough. But it was what they had. The lead transport touched down with a sound like thunder. The impact sent shockwaves across the desert floor. Dust clouds rose hundreds of feet into the air. Sarah circled overhead, watching as the massive cargo doors began to open. For a long moment, nothing happened. The doors stood open like the mouth of some great beast, revealing only darkness within. Then they came. The Zenari emerged slowly, blinking in the harsh Australian sunlight. They were humanoid in basic form with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, but that was where the similarities ended. Their skin was a deep violet color with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed gently across their bodies. They had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces, and their heads featured delicate crystalline structures that caught the light like prisms. They ranged in height from 4 feet to nearly 7 feet tall. They were beautiful and they were terrified. Sarah watched from above as the first Zenari stepped onto Earth's soil. It was a male carrying an infant in his arms. The child's bioluminescent patterns were weak and flickering, a clear sign of distress. The father looked around at the alien landscape, at the strange beings waiting to receive him, at the harsh sun beating down on his family. Then Dr. Lisa Hoffman stepped forward. She was a pediatrician from Germany who had volunteered for the first contact team. She had no idea if the Zenari could understand her, no idea if her smile would be interpreted correctly, but she tried anyway. She approached slowly, her hands visible and empty, and spoke in slow, clear English. "Welcome to Earth. My name is Lisa. We are here to help you. Please come with me. We have water, food, and shelter." The Zenari father stared at her with all 4 eyes. His crystalline head structures began to glow brighter, and Sarah would later learn this was a sign of emotional response. For a long moment he did not move. Then slowly, carefully he took a step forward. Then another. Then he was walking toward Dr. Hoffman, toward help, toward hope. Behind him, thousands more Zenari began to emerge from the transport. And behind that ship, dozens more were landing across Australia, Africa, and South America. The largest refugee crisis in human history had begun, and nobody knew if humanity was ready for it. High above Earth, in the observation station the Federation had established in orbit, Ambassador Krell watched the landing operations with clinical interest. Beside him stood his assistant, a younger Vorton named Srel. "They are actually accepting them," Srel said, surprise evident in his tone. "I calculated a 73% probability that Earth would refuse." "Never underestimate the capacity of primitive species for foolish idealism," Krell replied. "Watch carefully. Within 3 months their economy will collapse. Within 6 months their governments will be unstable. Within a year they will be begging us to take the Zenari back. This experiment in compassion will end in disaster, and the rest of the galaxy will learn a valuable lesson about staying in line. And if we are wrong? If somehow they succeed?" Krell turned all 4 of his eyes toward his assistant. "They will not succeed. Mathematics does not lie. Resources are finite. When push comes to shove, every species chooses survival over sentiment. The humans are no different." Down on Earth, in a medical tent in the Australian desert, Dr. Hoffman was learning just how different the Zenari were from humans. Their biology was unlike anything she had studied. They breathed oxygen like humans, but they needed it at higher concentrations. They could eat some earth foods, but many were toxic to them. Their body temperature was 15 degrees lower than humans. They communicated through sound, but also through the color changes in their bioluminescent patterns. The infant she had first seen was now lying on an examination table, its weak light flickering irregularly. Dr. Hoffman ran her scanner over the small body, trying to understand what was wrong. The child was dying and she had no idea how to save it. "We need to figure this out," she said to her team, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to understand their biology, their needs, their vulnerabilities. We need to do it fast." A young medic named David approached with a tablet. "Doctor, we're getting reports from all the landing sites. Hundreds of Zenari are showing similar symptoms. Weakness, fading bioluminescence, respiratory distress. It is like they are all suffering from the same condition." Dr. Hoffman felt a chill run down her spine. They had prepared for many things, but not for a mass medical crisis in the first hours. If hundreds were sick now, how many would be sick tomorrow? How many would die before they figured out how to help? She looked at the infant on the table, at its father standing nearby with hope and fear in his 4 eyes, and she made a decision. "Get me every xenobiologist, every biochemist, every doctor who has any experience with non-human biology. I do not care if we have to wake them up in the middle of the night. We are going to save these people." The father did not understand her words, but he understood her tone. His crystalline structures glowed brighter, and though Dr. Hoffman did not yet know it, she had just made humanity's first friend among the Zenari. Outside, the sun was setting on Earth's first day as a refugee host world. Millions of Zenari huddled in temporary shelters, uncertain about their future. Millions of humans worked through the night, trying to help beings they did not understand. And somewhere in the galaxy, the Federation watched and waited for humanity to fail. They would have to wait a very long time. The transformation. 3 months had passed since the ships first darkened Australian skies, and Earth had been transformed in ways that defied every prediction the Galactic Federation had made. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked through what had once been a temporary refugee camp and was now becoming something entirely different. The prefabricated shelters were being replaced by permanent structures that blended human and Zenari architectural styles. Gardens grew where there had been only dust, filled with plants from 2 worlds learning to coexist in the same soil. But the transformation had not come without cost. Elena carried a tablet displaying the grim statistics. 400,000 Zenari had died in the first month, most from a respiratory infection that human doctors had initially failed to recognize. The death toll would have been catastrophic if not for a breakthrough that came from the most unexpected source. Dr. Amara Obi, a pulmonologist from Nigeria, had been working around the clock when she noticed something unusual. The Zenari who lived in higher altitude camps had lower mortality rates. She hypothesized that the thinner air at higher elevations more closely matched the atmospheric conditions of their homeworld. Working with atmospheric scientists and engineers, she developed a treatment protocol that involved oxygen-enriched environments and a compound derived from Earth's deep-sea organisms that helped Zenari lungs process oxygen more efficiently. The treatment worked. Within 2 weeks of its implementation, the death rate dropped by 80%. Dr. Obi became a hero to the Zenari people, though she insisted she was just doing her job. Elena had watched the young doctor on television, exhausted but smiling, being thanked by a Zenari elder through a hastily assembled translation system. It was one of the first truly hopeful moments in what had been a nightmare of crisis management. Communication had been another massive hurdle. The Zenari spoke through a combination of vocalizations and bioluminescent patterns, a dual-channel language that was incredibly complex. Traditional translation software had failed completely until a team of linguists partnered with AI researchers to develop a system that could interpret both sound and light simultaneously. The breakthrough came from Dr. Kenji Tanaka in Tokyo, who had been working on visual communication systems for the deaf community. His work on translating sign language through AI provided the framework for interpreting Zenari light patterns. Now, 3 months later, basic communication was possible. It was imperfect, often clumsy, but people could talk to each other. That simple ability to communicate had changed everything. Elena entered the Central Coordination Building, a structure that had been built jointly by human and Zenari workers. Inside, she found James Okafor meeting with Zenari elder Tavasin, one of the refugee community leaders. The translator device sat between them on the table, a small black box with sensors pointed at Tavasin's bioluminescent patterns. "Dr. Vasquez, perfect timing," Okafor said, gesturing for her to join them. Elder Tavasin was just sharing some remarkable information about Zenari agricultural capabilities. Tavasin's skin patterns shifted to a warm amber color as she acknowledged Elena. The translator rendered her words with a slight mechanical quality but captured the meaning clearly. We wish to contribute more than we have been able to. My people feel shame at being such a burden on yours. You are not a burden, Elena said firmly. You are people in need and we help people in need. That is what makes us human. Your species has a good heart, Tavasin replied, her patterns flickering with what Elena had learned was the Zenari equivalent of a gentle smile. But we have skills that could benefit both our peoples. On our homeworld we were farmers, scientists, artists. We can offer more than gratitude. Okafor leaned forward with interest. What did you have in mind, Elder? The Zenari have cultivated crops for 10,000 years. We know how to grow food in difficult conditions, how to maximize yield from limited space, how to create symbiotic relationships between different plant species. We also have healing abilities that your doctors have only begun to understand. Elena exchanged a glance with Okafor. They had known the Zenari had agricultural experience, but the extent had not been clear. Healing abilities? Tavasin's patterns shifted to a deeper blue, indicating seriousness. Some of our people are what you might call empathic healers. We can sense pain, disease, emotional distress. We cannot cure everything, but we can help with diagnosis, with pain management, with emotional trauma. During the invasion of our world, our healers saved countless lives even without technology or medicine. Over the next few weeks, Elena watched as the Zenari began to integrate their skills into Earth systems. In agricultural zones, Zenari farmers worked alongside human agronomists to increase crop yields by 40% using techniques that involved complex companion planting and a deep understanding of soil microbiomes. The Zenari seemed to have an almost intuitive grasp of how living systems interacted, a skill that had been honed over millennia of sustainable farming on their water-scarce homeworld. In hospitals, Zenari healers began working with human doctors. A young healer named Zirian developed a partnership with Dr. Lisa Hoffman, who had been one of the first to welcome the refugees. Together, they discovered that Zirian could sense the early stages of diseases that human technology often missed. She could feel the subtle changes in a patient's biofield that indicated cancer, infection, or organ failure long before symptoms appeared. It was not magic, the Zenari explained, just a highly developed sense that their species had evolved over millions of years. Marcus Webb was a construction worker from Texas who had volunteered to help build permanent housing for the Zenari. He had come expecting to do manual labor and maybe feel good about helping. What he had not expected was to become friends with a Zenari engineer named Corval. Corval was 7 feet tall with deep violet skin and crystalline head structures that constantly shifted through different colors. At first, Marcus had been intimidated, but he quickly learned that Corval had a sense of humor and a deep appreciation for problem solving. They worked together designing hybrid structures that combined human construction techniques with Zenari engineering principles. The results were buildings that used 30% less material while being significantly stronger and more adaptable to environmental changes. One evening, as they sat on a half-finished roof watching the sunset, Marcus asked the question that had been bothering him for weeks. Why did your people get invaded? You seem advanced, intelligent. How did you lose your world? Corval's patterns dimmed to a sad gray. We chose peace over power. For our entire history as a spacefaring species, we refused to develop weapons. We believed that violence was a choice, not a necessity. When the Crothians came, we had nothing to fight them with except our hands. We learned a hard lesson. In a galaxy that values strength above all, pacifism is seen as weakness. That's not right, Marcus said quietly. No, it is not. But it is reality. The Galactic Federation is built on a hierarchy of power. Strong species dominate weak ones. Resources flow upward. Justice is a commodity only the powerful can afford. Your species is learning this now. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, maybe it is time someone changed the rules. Corval's patterns flickered with surprise. The Federation has existed for 50,000 years. It will not change because one small species wishes it. Yeah, well, humans have a history of doing impossible things. It is kind of our specialty. In orbit above Earth, Ambassador Krell was receiving reports that he found increasingly difficult to believe. His assistant Srel presented the latest economic data with visible confusion. Ambassador, Earth's economy has not collapsed. In fact, their GDP has increased by 12% in the last quarter. That is impossible. They have taken on 6 million refugees. The resource drain should be catastrophic. The Zenari agricultural techniques have dramatically increased food production. Their engineering insights have improved efficiency across multiple industries. And there is something else. Srel hesitated. The humans are forming emotional bonds with the Zenari. Not just diplomatic relationships but genuine friendships, partnerships. Some human and Zenari families are even forming what they call adoption bonds, taking responsibility for each other's well-being. Krell's scaled face showed the first sign of genuine concern Elena had ever seen from his species. This is not proceeding as calculated. No, Ambassador. It is not. There is more. Earth has begun advocating for the Zenari to be given voting rights in the Galactic Federation. They are arguing that refugees should not lose their political voice simply because they lost their homeworld. The Council will never approve that. Perhaps not. But other species are watching. 16 minor civilizations have sent observers to Earth to study what is happening here. They are seeing that compassion can be practical, that helping others can create mutual benefit. Ambassador, if this model spreads, it could fundamentally challenge the Federation's power structure. Krell stood and walked to his viewport, looking down at the blue and green planet below. Then we must ensure it does not spread. Prepare a report for the Council. Earth is becoming a problem that needs to be addressed. On Earth, in a small apartment in Melbourne, a miracle was happening. Maria Santos, a single mother who had lost her husband in an accident 2 years ago, sat at her kitchen table with a Zenari woman named Elwes Esera. They were reviewing adoption papers that had been hastily created by human and Zenari lawyers working together. Elwes Esera had lost her entire family in the invasion. Her husband and 2 children had been killed in the initial bombardment. She had survived only by chance, having been away from home when the attack came. For months, she had been hollow, going through the motions of survival but feeling nothing. Maria had noticed Elwes Esera sitting alone in the community center day after day. Something in the Zenari woman's posture, in the dimness of her bioluminescent patterns, spoke of a grief Maria understood all too well. She had started sitting with Elwes Esera, not talking at first, just sharing space. Slowly, through translation devices and patient effort, they had begun to communicate. They had discovered they were both mothers who had lost everything. They had discovered they both loved music, though their musical traditions were vastly different. They had discovered that grief transcended species, but so did healing. And now they were becoming a family by choice rather than blood. Are you certain about this? Elwes Esera asked, her patterns showing cautious hope. I do not want to impose on your life. Maria reached across the table and took Elwes Esera's hand. The Zenari's skin was cool and slightly textured, but it felt real and present. I am certain. My daughter needs a grandmother. I need a sister. And you need a family. We can build this together. Elwes Esera's patterns blazed with bright golden light, the Zenari expression of pure joy. Then yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes. It was not an isolated story. Across the planet, similar bonds were forming. A Zenari teacher in Tokyo was working with human children, teaching them about her culture while learning about theirs. A Zenari artist in Paris was creating sculptures that blended human and Zenari aesthetic traditions, selling them to support both communities. A Zenari musician in Rio was collaborating with human composers, creating fusion music that was becoming wildly popular. The refugees that the Federation had dumped on Earth as punishment were becoming something the Federation had never anticipated: partners, friends, family. 6 months after the first ships landed, Elena stood before the United Nations General Assembly with Elder Tavasin at her side. The chamber was packed with representatives from every nation, all there to hear the announcement. 6 months ago, Elena began, we faced an impossible choice. We could turn away 6 million people and let them die, or we could accept them despite having no preparation, no resources, and no plan. We chose compassion. Many in the galaxy expected us to fail. They expected our economy to collapse, our society to fracture, our people to turn on each other under the strain. She paused and looked at Tavasin, who nodded encouragement. Instead, something remarkable happened. We discovered that helping others does not weaken us. It strengthens us. The Zenari brought skills, knowledge, and perspectives that have made Earth better. Their agricultural techniques are feeding millions. Their medical insights are saving lives. Their engineering principles are building stronger communities. And most importantly, they have become our friends, our neighbors, our family. She held up a document. Today we are announcing the Earth Zenari Integration Act. This law grants full citizenship to all Zenari refugees who wish to remain on Earth. They will have the same rights, the same responsibilities, and the same opportunities as any human citizen. And we are sending a message to the Galactic Federation. Compassion is not weakness. It is our greatest strength. The chamber erupted in applause. Not everyone agreed. There were still those who resented the resources spent on refugees, but they were a minority. Most of humanity had seen the benefits of choosing compassion over cruelty. On the Federation observation station, Ambassador Krell watched the broadcast with growing alarm. This is unacceptable. They are turning our punishment into a triumph. What do we do, Ambassador? Krell asked. Krell was silent for a long moment. We remind them that the galaxy is not a kind place. We remind them that power still matters more than principle. Prepare a message for Earth. It is time we discussed the cost of their defiance. But down on Earth, in homes and schools and workplaces across the planet, humans and Zenari were building something the Federation had never seen before. A society based on mutual respect rather than domination, on compassion rather than cruelty, on the radical idea that all beings deserve dignity and care. The Federation had tried to break humanity by forcing them to care for 6 million refugees. Instead, humanity had gained 6 million new family members, and together they were about to show the galaxy that there was another way to live. The road ahead would not be easy. The Federation would not give up its power structure without a fight. But for the first time in 50,000 years, there was hope for something better. And hope, as humans knew well, was a dangerous thing to give to people who had been told they were powerless. The galaxy was about to change, and it would start with a simple act of compassion on a small blue planet that refused to accept cruelty as inevitable.